In the opening moments of a heated courtroom check-in, a white cop arrogantly slaps a black woman after assuming she's a clerk with an attitude. But what he doesn't realize is she's not just anyone. A sharp shift in tone follows, her calm yet spine-chilling response setting the stage for a brutal reckoning. "You people should know your place now. Move before I make you." The words cracked through the marble halls of the municipal courthouse like a whip dot. It was 8:17 a.m. The sun filtered through tall stained-glass windows, casting patches of amber and crimson onto the polished floors. The smell of old paper and cold metal hung in the air. Officers leaned against walls sipping burnt coffee. Clerks shuffled papers at the reception desk, and distant chatter echoed from the courtroom doors. And, at the center of it all, he stood there. Officer Brent Callahan, white mid-40s, decorated but defiant, with a reputation for not tolerating nonsense, especially from loudmouths. His uniform was crisp, his jaw tight. His eyes scanned the black woman standing calmly in front of him like she was beneath him. She had said only one thing so far: "This courtroom isn't yours to control." That was it. Calm, clear, and completely unwelcome in his world. "Excuse me?" Callahan snapped, stepping forward. "You don't tell me how to run a building I've secured for 20 years. Who even are you? Just another clerk with attitude?" She remained motionless. Her outfit was plain, a deep navy dress suit, no badge, no robe, nothing that screamed power. But her posture? It radiated unshakable presence. "I'm not here for an argument," she replied softly. "But I suggest you step back." The nearby officers paused. One of them, a younger Latino cop, shifted uneasily. Something felt off, but Callahan didn't notice. Or maybe he did and didn't care. "You people always think you can talk." "Down to authority," Callahan sneered. "You think you can threaten me in my house?" And then it happened. A sharp, open-palmed slap. Loud, jarring. Disrespectful. It echoed like a gunshot across the lobby. Heads turned. Files dropped. Someone gasped. One of the security cameras swiveled, catching it all. The woman's face remained turned to the side, her cheek red from the sting. But her eyes? Stone cold. And then she reached into her slim leather folder, slowly, calmly, and pulled out card. One single card. Thick, embossed, gold-dashed trim. She held it up without looking at him and said just 6 words. "I hope you enjoyed your badge." Callahan's smirk froze. He blinked. Once, twice. He snatched the card from her fingers like a man reaching for proof of a lie. His eyes scanned the title, and his knees didn't buckle, but his pride did. Hun. Judge Amara Lynch, presiding federal judge, 7th District Court. Room fell silent. So silent that you could hear the hum of the vending machine by the back wall. The young Latino officer backed away, lips parting in disbelief. Callahan turned ghost white. His jaw moved, but no words came out. His authority had been pulled out from under him like a cheap rug. Judge Amara Lynch finally turned to face him. No anger, no revenge in her expression. Just a knowing calm, the kind that didn't need to shout, to strike fear. "You'll be escorted out by court security now," she said. "Do not resist." Callahan's mouth twitched. For a moment, he looked like he might try to spin it, defend himself, bark an order, reach for some unseen rank. But then the court doors opened. 3 federal marshals walked in with deliberate steps, and every soul in that lobby knew something irreversible had begun. She turned without a word and walked toward the courtroom. Every click of her heels echoed like a countdown, not just to his disciplinary hearing but to his complete unraveling. The air had changed, not just in the lobby, but in every hallway, office, and chamber of the courthouse. The silence wasn't calm anymore, it was loaded, fragile, electric. News spread faster than paperwork ever could. They didn't need emails or announcements. The security footage had already made its rounds through back channels, and by the time Judge Amara Lynch entered courtroom 4B, a dozen smartphones had quietly buzzed in the pockets of bailiffs, clerks, and lawyers. He slapped her? That's a federal judge, bro. His career is over. Like over. He didn't know who she was. Even if he didn't, he hit someone. Inside a side corridor, Officer Callahan sat on a metal bench. Alone, his face was tight with frustration. But the redness in his neck wasn't just rage. It was fear, humiliation, and disbelief tangled in one hot coil. His badge was gone, confiscated by marshals. His gun, too. Officially placed under administrative review, though everyone knew what that meant. They just hadn't put it in writing yet. Footsteps approached. Heavy, familiar. Sergeant Dwyer, his longtime colleague, stopped beside him. "Brent," he said, voice low. Callahan looked up sharply. "You believe that crap? She baited me. Didn't even say who she was." Dwyer didn't answer right away. He rubbed the back of his neck. "She didn't have to. You walked in swinging. Like you own the building." "I've walked these halls for 20 years, man." "Exactly. You should have known better." The silence between them thickened. Callahan's voice dropped. "So you're on her side?" "I'm not picking sides," Dwyer said, voice quieter now. "I'm saying you made a choice that can't be undone, and now the whole place is watching." From down the hall, two junior officers turned a corner and spotted them. The moment their eyes met Callahan's, they looked away fast and kept walking. Callahan noticed. His jaw clenched. He used to own this building in a way, not with power, but with presence. Officers nodded when he walked by. Dash shared inside jokes with him. Even the janitor knew his coffee order. Now, he was a virus nobody wanted to catch. Meanwhile, inside courtroom 4B, Judge Lynch stood tall behind the bench. Her robe now on, her voice composed and commanding. The courtroom was packed not just with case participants, but with extra faces lingering in the back rows, pretending to take notes. Whispers moved like wind. "Is that her? Can't believe she's back on the bench already." She didn't flinch. Batman messed with the wrong one. But she didn't mention it. Not once, not in tone, not in word. She carried on like a true professional, because she knew that dignity was its own form of destruction, and she'd already struck the first blow. Back in the corridor, Callahan stared at the floor. Another figure appeared beside him. Lieutenant Rebecca Sloan. She didn't sit. She didn't soften her tone. "You're to report to Internal Affairs at 3 p.m., she said briskly. "They'll begin their inquiry then. You're suspended pending investigation." Callahan scoffed. "I'm a decorated officer. One mistake and they drag me like a rookie?" "You think that was your first mistake?" She shot back. He blinked. She continued. "People have been covering for your outbursts for years, Brent, but now you touched someone untouchable. You gave everyone the green light to stop protecting. You." He stood, his body suddenly shaking with fury. "This is political. This is a setup. No, this is consequences." She turned and walked away without another word. He stood there, alone again. But this time, the walls felt smaller, the whispers louder, the future darker. One misjudged slap, one misread assumption. And now the very empire he'd built brick by arrogant brick was beginning to crumble beneath his feet. 2 hours later, the basement lights of the Internal Affairs office buzzed faintly, casting long shadows over dusty filing cabinets and tired fluorescent ceilings. It was a place where careers were either cleaned or incinerated. Detective Carla Menon sat at her desk with a stack of manila folders in front of her, each one stamped with a name she'd heard for over a decade, Callahan Brent. She exhaled slowly, rubbing her temple as she flipped the first one open. Excessive force complaint. Dismissed. Verbal misconduct toward civilian. Warning issued. Alleged discriminatory stop. Inconclusive. Body cam deactivated mid-intervention. No action taken. One after another. The same pattern. Red flags tucked into gray silence. Carla leaned back in her chair. This man's jacket reads like a warning label, she muttered. Her partner, Inspector James Coley, glanced over from his side of the table. But nothing ever stuck, he said. It's all smoke. No confirmed fire. Until now. They both knew what that meant. This wasn't just about one slap. That had just pulled the thread. The real damage lay in the entire sweater unraveling. Meanwhile, Officer Callahan sat in a plain gray interview room down the hallway. His body was stiff, his hands resting on the table like stone. He'd been here dozens of times on the other side of the glass. But today, he waited, observed, investigated. He hated the feeling. Powerless, naked. The door creaked open. Carla entered, placing a recorder on the desk. Officer Callahan, she said, voice neutral. This is a preliminary conversation. You're not under arrest yet, but everything you say can be used in the final review. Callahan leaned back in his chair. This is a joke. Carla didn't flinch. We'll let the facts decide. That? She clicked the recorder on. Start from the top. Why did you engage with Judge Lynch in the courthouse lobby? I didn't know she was a judge. That wasn't the question. Callahan's nostrils flared. She was standing there, trying to get in without credentials, pushing attitude. Carla flipped open a file. According to witness statements, she said only, this courtroom isn't yours to control. Callahan didn't respond. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't touch you. Just disagreed. Still silence. Carla leaned in. Why the slap? He finally spoke quietly. She looked like one of them. One of who, officer? He realized what he just said. His mouth opened, but nothing came. Out. Across the building, Judge Lynch stood in her chambers, gazing out the window. The city below pulsed like a restless machine. Her assistant, Nina, entered with a file. The press wants a comment, she said. Judge Lynch didn't turn around. No. Comment, she replied. The system can speak for itself. But the mayor is asking if you'll go public, at least confirm your identity in the video. Lynch finally turned. I didn't survive Harvard Law to become a clickbait headline. My job is justice, not drama. Nina paused. You know they're scared of you now, right? Lynch tilted her head. Good. It wasn't anger. It was resolve. Back in the EA office, Carla continued questioning. You've had 19 complaints in 11 years, she sighed, flipping through pages. 8 of them dismissed, 5 sealed, 4 internally handled. I do my job. No, you got away with doing it your way. Callahan's fingers tapped the table. You're turning one mistake into a witch hunt. One mistake. Wouldn't have left this many bodies behind. He leaned forward. You think you're clean? You think everyone here hasn't slipped? Carla smiled coldly. I slip on ice. You shove people into it. A knock at the door interrupted them. Coley stepped in and handed her a small drive. From the security room, he said. Lobby footage, 4 different angles, all synced. She nodded and plugged it into the monitor. There it was. The slap. The silence. The judge's calm reveal. Callahan couldn't even watch his own performance. He turned away from the screen like it might burn him. This isn't just evidence, Carla said quietly. This is a message. To everyone who thought rank made them untouchable. Outside the interview room, a crowd of young officers huddled near a hallway monitor, watching the replay in loops. Some gasped. Some looked stunned, but one young black officer shook his head and whispered, finally. It began with a whisper, then a vibration. Then a wildfire. At exactly 7:48 p.m., a low-resolution clip surfaced on Twitter. 40 seconds, poor lighting, but crystal clear impact. Racist cop slaps black woman in courthouse. Seconds later, fines. Out, she's a federal judge. The caption burned, and by morning, it had 2.8 million views. Within minutes, the comments turned savage. He slapped a judge? If she had slapped him back, they would have arrested her. This is why we say the system protects itself until it doesn't. Her calm shook me. She didn't even raise her voice. The raw footage from the security feed leaked next 4 angles, cinched. The slap, the frozen stares. Her quiet power, his slow collapse. By dawn, it had hit national news. CNN, MSNBC. Even conservative anchors couldn't ignore it. Sources confirm the woman in question is Hun Judge Amara Lynch, one of the youngest federal judges appointed in the 7th District. Inside her home, Judge Lynch sat at her kitchen table, sipping black coffee in silence. The windows were closed, but she could still feel the city pulsing with noise. Her phone buzzed. Again, another voicemail from a news outlet. Another request for a statement. Another exclusive offer. She ignored them all. Nina, her assistant, stood nearby, phone in hand. "They're calling it the slap verdict," she said, half smiling, half exhausted. Lynch gave a tired chuckle. "How original." Nina tilted her head. "You sure you don't want to say something?" "No." Her voice was firm. "Let the facts speak. The louder I talk, the quicker they'll try to make me the villain." She was right. Back at the precinct, Officer Callahan paced in a small office. He was suspended, but not yet charged. That limbo, once his shield, now felt like a spotlight. A notification popped on his cracked phone screen. "You're trending. #Slapgate. #Justice for Judge Lynch." Double quotes. His face tightened. He opened the video again, desperate to control the damage in his head. But it looked worse every time. The slap wasn't just physical. It was symbolic. White male officer. Black female judge. Public building. Everything about it screamed America's deepest wound. His lawyer, Rick Stein, walked in. "You need to stop." "Watching that," Rick said flatly. Callahan tossed the phone aside. "They're painting me like I'm a monster." Rick didn't blink. "You slapped a federal judge, Brent. There's no version of that where you come out clean." Callahan rubbed his temples. "I didn't know who she was." Rick sat down slowly. "Intent doesn't erase damage. It might reduce the fire, but the house is already burning." On the city's west side, at a coffee shop called Bean and Justice, a group of young law students gathered around a laptop. "She didn't even flinch." One said. "She didn't need to," another replied. "She knew exactly what her silence meant." "Queen energy," a girl whispered, almost in awe. In an uptown newsroom, journalist Clara Boone slammed her hand on her desk. "This is the biggest judicial scandal of the year," she said to her editor. "I want to call him out in 2 hours. This isn't about a slap, it's about how deeply baked in racism still is, even in the very buildings meant to uphold the law." Her editor nodded. "Push it, full page." Back in the city hall, the mayor called an emergency press briefing. He stepped up to the podium with carefully rehearsed empathy. "We are aware of the shocking incident involving a federal judge and a city officer. Let me be clear, no one is above accountability, not in this administration, not in this city." The cameras clicked like rain. The room was tense. Everyone was watching. Across town, Carla from Internal Affairs reviewed yet another report, a 2017 complaint against Callahan. That had been buried under insufficient evidence. A teenager, a broken arm. No footage. Now those ghosts were walking again. She turned to her partner. "The internet is burning. We need to move faster." He nodded. We don't get to sweep this one, not anymore. Judge Lynch, meanwhile, stepped out of her home into the sunlight for the first time since the video exploded. A group of strangers across the street clapped slowly. Not loud, not dramatic but meaningful. She gave them a small nod and walked toward her car. Heels clicking with calm purpose. Power was shifting, not with rage, but with silence, and the world was watching. The badge on the nightstand no longer glowed with pride. It just sat there, dull, heavy, accusing. Officer Brent Callahan stared at it from the edge of his bed, eyes red, fists clenched. His once pristine uniform hung limp in the closet, untouched for days. Outside, a crowd of reporters buzzed, like wasps, waiting for a reaction he refused to give. Inside, the real storm brewed. His wife, Marla, stood in the doorway, arms crossed, silence boiling. "You hit a judge," she finally said. Her voice cracked, not with emotion, but disappointment. "I didn't know who she was." He mumbled again. "That's not the problem, Brent." She took a step closer. "The problem is why you did it at all." He looked up sharply. "So now you're against me?" "I'm asking you to see what everyone else is seeing. This isn't just about her. It's about you." He stood, anger rising. "I've spent my whole life protecting this city." "No," she said coldly. "You've spent your whole life controlling it." That line cut deeper than any headline. He didn't respond. Couldn't, because somewhere inside he knew she was right. The door slammed behind her, and for the first time in years, Brent Callahan felt completely alone, not just physically, but spiritually. No one was covering for him now. Not the union, not the brothers in blue, not even the system that once shielded him. Meanwhile, across the city, a group of community leaders gathered in a church basement under the banner of public justice now. There were organizers, pastors, teachers, and survivors, each with their own scars, stories, and reasons to be there. A young mother named Tasha stood at the front. "I filed a complaint against Callahan in 2019, she said. "My son was 15. They said it wasn't serious enough, but now they believe me." Another voice spoke up. "This is our moment. We finally have proof, not just from one camera, but from his own hand." They passed around a folder, a growing collection of sealed complaints unearthed by a legal nonprofit now swarming his record like bees to honey. Back at the station, Callahan walked into the locker room, head down, cap low. The air turned thick. Conversations died mid-sentence. A group of fellow officers huddled near the back lockers. Some looked away. Others gave tight nods. But one officer, Luis Navarro, spoke. "Hey, Callahan," he said, his voice louder than necessary. "Word is, you're making us all look bad." Brent froze, turned. "You got something to say to me?" He said low. Luis didn't flinch. "Just saying, man. We're out there trying to protect and serve, not slap federal judges like we're on some reality show." Another cop chuckled. Brent stepped forward, fists clenched. But before anything could ignite, a voice boomed from behind. "Enough." It was Lieutenant Sloan. Her glare was ice. "This isn't a boxing gym. You want to throw punches, Callahan? Try a courtroom." Brent backed off, barely breathing. Sloan's voice lowered. "You're toxic right now. You walk in here, morale drops 20%. You know what that means?" He said nothing. She continued, "It means even the cops who used to defend you now can't afford to." The words hit him like bricks. He wasn't just outnumbered. He was outdated. Over at the courthouse, Judge Lynch sat in her private chambers, reviewing a civil rights motion, calm, focused. But behind her, Nina paced anxiously. "They're calling for a citywide protest," she said. "They're chanting your name." Lynch didn't look up. "I'm not a hero. You are to them." She closed the file, finally turning to face her. I didn't come here to be worshipped. I came here to work. Justice doesn't need a cape, just consistency. But even she couldn't ignore the shift, happening in real time. That quiet slap had become a civic scream. Back at Callahan's house, a rock suddenly shattered his front window. Then another. He rushed to the porch, yelling into the darkness, "Cowards!" But the street was empty, except for a flyer fluttering on the ground. Accountability is coming, one way or another. His hands shook as he picked it up. He was no longer the enforcer. He was the hunted, and deep inside, he was beginning to crack. The city hadn't seen a crowd like this in years. By 10:22 a.m., the courthouse steps were buried under a wave of protesters, black, white, Latino, Asian, young, old, all united under one chant: "Hands off justice. No more silence." Signs waved high in the July heat. She took the slap, now he takes the stand. Judges deserve dignity. Justice is watching you back. The sound of footsteps, drums, and raw voices echoed off glass towers and concrete pillars. Helicopters hovered above. News vans lined the sidewalks. And at the center of it all stood a small wooden podium. A young speaker, Malik Jenkins, a community advocate with a fire in his voice, stepped up. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply said, "It shouldn't take status for black women to be believed." The crowd erupted. Meanwhile, inside the DA's office, a storm of paperwork flooded the long table. District Attorney Selena Miles leaned over a file marked in bold, "People versus Officer Brent Callahan." Her voice cut through the murmurs. "We've waited long enough. We have video, witness statements, complaint history, and public pressure. If we don't move today, we become part of the silence." One of her assistants hesitated. "Won't charging him ignite even more division?" Selena looked him dead in the eye. "There's no justice without risk." At exactly 12:05 p.m., the official statement dropped. Effective immediately, Officer Brent Callahan has been formally charged with battery, obstruction of justice, and misconduct in office. It hit the news cycle like a meteor. CNN breaking. Officer who slapped federal judge now charged. MSNBC, The Guardian, even Al Jazeera. Social media shattered with reactions. Finally. Took long enough. Now watch them squirm. At a press conference later that afternoon, the Day stood behind a podium and delivered the line that would define her career: "Justice wears a robe, not a badge." Meanwhile, in her private chambers, Judge Lynch sat quietly, staring at a single letter resting on her desk. It was from the United States Department of Justice. An invitation. They wanted her to speak on national reform efforts on camera, on record. As a symbol of judicial resilience, Nina read the letter over her shoulder. "This is huge." Lynch didn't answer. You could set the tone for everything. Lead the change. Still no answer. Finally, she stood and walked to the window, arms crossed. "I never asked for this spotlight," she said. Nina stepped forward. "But maybe it asked for you." Outside, the chants grew louder. The people weren't asking for permission anymore. They were demanding presence. Back at the precinct, Callahan's arrest was quiet, but heavy. He didn't speak as they read him his rights. He didn't look up when they cuffed his wrists. The badge that once made him untouchable was now just a memory. In the car ride to Central Holding, he muttered to his lawyer, "You think I'll get bail?" Rick sighed. "With that video? And the protests outside? Honestly, I doubt it." Callahan leaned his head back and stared at the ceiling of the police cruiser. From enforcer to prisoner, from protector to accused. He was no longer the voice of order. Now he was the symbol of its failure. In the holding cell, he sat alone. A TV flickered overhead, muted, showing scenes of protesters hugging, chanting, dancing. People weren't afraid anymore. They were activated, and all around him, there was no brotherhood. No silence. No loyalty. Just four cement walls and the echo of a slap that refused to die. Later that evening, in a candlelight vigil near the courthouse, survivors of police misconduct shared stories in hushed tones. Tasha, the same mother from earlier, stepped up with a photo of her son. "He's alive," she said, "but his dignity was stolen. Tonight, we get a piece of it back." A slow, solemn chant began again. Dignity, justice, dignity, justice. Judge Lynch watched from the edge of the crowd, unrecognized in a simple gray coat. No robe, no podium, just a quiet citizen. She didn't speak. She didn't need to, because her silence had already spoken loud enough. Courtroom 6A was full to the brim. Journalists scribbled notes behind laptops. Protesters turned observers sat with folded arms. And every few minutes, a camera flash from the hallway doors reminded everyone, this wasn't just a trial. It was a reckoning. Officer Brent Callahan sat at the defense table in a gray suit, not a uniform. No badge, no swagger, just a carefully manufactured look of remorse. His lawyer, Rick Stein, stood confidently as the trial began. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, "this case is not about race. It is not about media outrage. It is about a moment, one misjudged, misunderstood moment blown out of proportion." Callahan nodded slightly, rehearsed and rigid, but Selena Miles was ready. Her eyes were sharp, and her tone didn't flinch. She rose. "This case is about race. It's about power. It's about what happens when someone who wears the uniform of protection weaponizes it against someone they wrongly assumed was beneath them." A murmur passed through the gallery, and the war began. Witness after witness was called. Officer Navarro took the stand first. He recounted the moment. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't resist. She just stood there, calm. The slap came out of nowhere. I'll never forget the sound. Rick cross-examined with fire. "Did you ever see Judge Lynch identify herself?" "No." "So my client had no way of knowing she wasn't a threat?" "A threat?" "She had a file folder in her hand, sir." The room tightened. Next came the security footage played on 3 large screens. The same angles that had gone viral online. The silence during playback was deafening. Then came the victim impact statement, not from Judge Lynch herself, but read aloud by a court officer on her behalf. "I do not wish revenge. One wish restoration. Not just for myself, but for every person assumed to be less than in a place where justice is supposed to see all equally." Callahan didn't meet the screen. His jaw was clenched, but not from anger, now from humiliation. Behind him, his wife Marla sat stiffly, distant, cold. She hadn't visited him in jail once. During recess, the hallway buzzed. "I think he's going down," one spectator whispered. "He should," someone else replied. "He's the face of everything." Broken. Back inside, Callahan was called to testify in his own defense. He stood, adjusted his tie, took the oath. Rick's questions came softly. "Why did you approach her that morning?" Callahan sighed. "She was standing in an unauthorized area. No ID badge." She was dismissive. I reacted badly. I didn't know who she was. And if you had known, I would have handled it differently." A pause. Then the DA stood. Selena didn't hold back. "So, Officer Callahan, it's not what you did that was wrong. It's who you did it to." "I didn't mean it like that. You didn't slap a judge. You slapped a black woman who you thought had no power." Callahan froze. "This wasn't your first complaint. You've got years of silenced reports, sealed files, and shielded misconduct. You didn't snap. You expected to get away with it because you always have." The courtroom sat frozen. She walked slowly toward him. You didn't just misjudge her. You misjudged the country's patience with men like you." His lip trembled. "Do you regret it, officer?" A long pause. Then, "I regret that it got this far." A collective gasp. That wasn't remorse. That was resentment. The judge at the bench raised an eyebrow, but stayed quiet. Back in her chambers, Judge Amara Lynch watched the trial via a secure internal feed. She had been advised not to interfere, not even attend in person to maintain judicial neutrality. Nina entered with tea. "He's cracking," she said. Lynch didn't respond, but her eyes stayed locked on the screen, because while she wasn't there physically, her presence haunted every word. Outside, the protest crowd had returned, but they weren't yelling. They were standing in silence, holding candles. A new sign appeared at the front of the line. "This is bigger than a slap. This is about the weight behind it." The second day of the trial began with a strange hush. Callahan looked more exhausted than before, his eyes red, suit wrinkled. His lawyer, Rick Stein, flipped through folders nervously, as if he knew something unexpected was coming. He wasn't wrong. Selena Miles rose with a sealed envelope in hand. "Your Honor," she said, "the state respectfully requests to call a late-entry rebuttal witness. Someone we only located yesterday thanks to the public release of this trial's footage." The defense stood up instantly. "Objection. We were not notified this is trial by ambush." But the judge allowed it. "Proceed. Let's hear the witness." From the side door, a woman stepped in, late 30s, black, nervous but steady, wearing plain jeans and a green top. No badge, no briefcase, just the weight of history in her steps. Selena gestured gently. "Please state your name for the record." "Danielle Harper." "Miss Harper, how do you know Officer Callahan?" A pause. Then, softly, "He was my school resource officer in 2008 at Jefferson High." The air changed instantly. "Why are you here today?" Her voice cracked. "Because I've kept quiet long enough. I saw the video on the news, and I recognized the way he looked at her. I've seen that look before." Rick Stein stood quickly. "Your Honor, I must object again. This is prejudicial." Overruled. The judge said, "Let her speak." Danielle continued. "Back then, I was 15. I got caught with a book in my bag from the library that I forgot to check out. They called it stealing." She took a deep breath. "He slammed me against a locker, called me a thief, said girls like me don't learn, just take." There was no camera, no witnesses, and no one believed me when I told them. He wrote me up, and I lost my scholarship eligibility for college prep. Selena stepped closer. "Did you file a complaint?" "I tried, but the principal said Callahan had a spotless record and warned me not to ruin a good cop's career over a misunderstanding." Gasps echoed through the gallery. Danielle's hands were shaking now. "But I remember the exact same words he used that day. The same words he used on that judge. It was never about the crime, it was about who he thought we were." On the defense bench, Callahan's face drained of color. His lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. The DA turned to the judge. "We submit this testimony to establish a pattern not just of misconduct, but of racially motivated intimidation spanning over a decade." Rick tried to cross-examine. "Ms. Harper, isn't it true you were reprimanded multiple times in high school?" "Yes," she said calmly. "And every time it was Officer Callahan who decided what went in the report." Rick faltered. "You're just bitter." Selena cut in. "Objection. Argumentative." Sustained. Back in the gallery, murmurs turned into whispers. Journalists started typing faster. The crowd outside had grown by the hour. Inside, Callahan sat frozen. As if the walls were closing in. After court was adjourned for the day, Brent walked slowly toward the hallway, avoiding every eye. But before he could escape the crowd, a voice called out from the back, "Do you remember me?" He turned. It was another woman. Then another, and another black women. Brown women, former students, social workers, mothers. Each holding a copy of an old complaint, each one dismissed, each one marked unsubstantiated, and each one finally speaking out. Callahan didn't answer. He couldn't. Instead, he pushed through the hallway in silence, hunted not by violence, but by truth. Across town, Judge Lynch watched from her chamber window. She'd seen the live news feed, heard Danielle's voice. Nina sat beside her, stunned. How many lives has he damaged? Lynch didn't blink. Enough that silence is no longer an option. Outside the court, candles now lined the steps. Some held signs, others held each other. And one girl, no older than 12, clutched a notebook with a quote scribbled across the front. "They always say to respect the badge. But what happens when the badge forgets to respect us?" The final day of the trial had arrived. Outside, the courthouse was swarming. Protesters held signs with Callahan's name crossed out in red. News vans lined the block. Live streams buzzed across phones, TVs, and tablets in homes across the country. Inside, the temperature felt colder, like something sacred was about to break. Brent Callahan sat in his chair, stone still. His uniform had been replaced with a plain gray suit, 2 sizes too big, no badge, no weapon. Just a man. Stripped out. His lawyer, Rick, whispered something in his ear. Brent didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the judge's bench. Judge Leona Lynch, the same woman he had humiliated. The same woman who now held the fate of his career in her hand. But what no one expected was that he had a plan of his own. As the court came to order, Lynch spoke with poise. After reviewing all testimony, evidence, and the cumulative harm caused, this court is prepared to render a decision. She paused. That's when Brent stood up. "Your Honor, I need to speak." The entire courtroom froze. His lawyer tried to stop him. "Sit down, this isn't how it works." But Brent ignored him. "I was set up." This entire trial was political. "You," he pointed at Lynch, "you're not objective. You've made this personal." Gasps rang out. The bailiff stepped forward, but Lynch raised her hand to pause him. She looked at Brent calmly. "Go on, Officer Callahan." He smiled tightly, thinking he still had control. "I've served this city for 19 years. Protected people like you from criminals like them. And now you want to erase all that over one slap?" A woman in the gallery shouted, "It wasn't just one slap. It was a lifetime of them." But Brent didn't flinch. "You think taking away my job will fix racism? You think putting me on trial makes you a hero? You're still standing behind a desk I swore to protect." Silence. Dead silence. Then Judge Lynch finally spoke. Her voice was clear, sharp, like glass. "No, Officer Callahan, I don't need to be a hero. I only need to be just." She turned to the courtroom. "Let the record show that Officer Callahan's behavior today has confirmed what this court already feared, not only a lack of remorse, but a fundamental misunderstanding of his role in the system meant to serve the people." She looked directly at him. "You didn't just slap a judge. You slapped justice." Brent's smirk faded. "Therefore, effective immediately, Officer Brent Callahan is stripped of his badge, rank, pension, and the right to ever serve in law enforcement again. In addition, he is remanded to federal custody to face pending civil rights violation charges filed by multiple victims." The room erupted. Some cried. Some clapped. Others simply sat back in stunned silence. Brent didn't move, even as the bailiff cuffed him, even as people chanted outside, "No more silence, no more shields." He looked around like he couldn't believe this was real. As he was escorted through the crowd, someone held up a mirror, literally. A small square mirror, taped with a note, "Face what you've done." He turned away, but it was too late. The cameras caught every angle, every tick of sweat on his temple, every crack in his armor. Later that night, news anchors declared it a landmark trial in modern racial justice history. Former victims began sharing their stories on national television. Protests turned into panels. Panels turned into policy drafts. And across the city, police precincts held emergency meetings. Change had begun. But inside her chambers, Judge Lynch sat quietly with her tea. Nina entered and whispered, "You did it." Lynch shook her head. "No, we did. The people did. And we've only just begun." Outside her office window, candlelight vigils filled the park. And for the first time in a long time, Lynch let a single tear fall. Not from sadness, but from release. 6 months had passed. Autumn leaves rustled down the courthouse steps where, not long ago, chants had roared like thunder. Now the air was crisp, quiet, and still, like a city learning to breathe again. Brent Callahan was a name barely spoken anymore. At least, not with fear, not with pride either. Just ... History, a cautionary tale whispered in training rooms and law schools across the country. His case had gone federal. His trial televised. His fall complete. In the aftermath, policies changed. A new civilian review board was formed. Anonymous complaint lines were flooded. Racist conduct inside the force, once laughed off, was now being investigated seriously. But the most important change? People started to speak. Victims who had suffered in silence came forward. Officers who'd once looked away began stepping up. And across social media, one phrase kept circulating: "The judge he slapped changed everything." Judge Leona Lynch had become a symbol, not because she wanted to be, but because her silence that day had been louder than 1,000 speeches. Today, she was at a university auditorium, the same place she once spoke to interns about neutrality in law. Only now she was invited to give a keynote called "Dignity Under Fire: When Justice Stands Tall." As she stepped on stage, the crowd rose in applause. Cameras flashed, professors nodded, and in the back row, Nina smiled quietly. Lynch took a breath. "They asked me to speak about dignity. But dignity isn't something you talk about. It's something you hold on to when no one else will hand it to you." She scanned the audience. 6 months ago, I was reminded of a truth too many forget, that justice is not just a robe or a bench. It's a decision, a risk, a stand, even when you stand alone. A hush spread over the room. What happened to me was not unique. What happened after was what made it historic. Because people watched, people responded, and people, finally, sighed, "Enough." Applause erupted. Later that night, while walking through the park, Lynch passed the same spot where protesters had once stood. Now, a bronze plaque was embedded in stone. It read, "In honor of all those who stood when silence was easier. Justice is not what you wear, it's what you withstand." She paused there. Across from the plaque, a mural had been painted, a faceless police officer reaching out to slap a figure. But the figure had no fear, only light behind her. And painted in golden letters above, "You just slapped justice." Aye. Soft breeze stirred the fallen leaves, and behind her, footsteps approached. It was Nina. "You okay?" Lynch nodded slowly. "I am now." They sat on a nearby bench as families strolled past and children played without worry. "Funny," Nina sighed. "You didn't yell. You didn't fight back. You just stood there. And it changed everything." Lynch turned to her. Sometimes the loudest revolution is simply not stepping back. They watched as a group of young law students gathered. Near the plaque, taking pictures, reading the words out loud, inspired. "Do you ever think about him?" Nina asked. A long pause. Not anymore. Because the moment he raised his hand, he revealed everything he was hiding. The system just took a while to catch up. Lynch looked up at the sky. The sun had dipped low, casting an amber glow over the city skyline. A symbolic calm. Brent Callahan was no longer a badge, no longer a threat, he was a reminder. And Leanna Lynch? She was no longer just a judge. She was a chapter in a new book of justice.